And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. That's right. I said welcome back because I know you were just listening to our stuff and you loved it so much you came back for more. I don't blame you, folks. That was brilliant. I would have come back for more too. Now, why do we have so much more for you? Because this is the podcast. It's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And our guest today is, wait for it, is a podcaster. You figured it out. You cracked our code. Folks, this is the place where we all raise each other up, and this is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So let's get sailing and bring in our guest today. This is a very unique guest for this podcast. I cannot wait to have this conversation with this lady. She's already smiling and laughing at me a little bit, I think. I think she's going to shock the old guy today. So we're just going to wait and see what's happening. She is a certified sex educator. She is a sex and dating coach. She also is the host of the hit podcast Taboo to Truth, Life and Sex After 50. Please welcome to the show, Karen Bigman. Karen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. And my goodness, I am so hoarse today. I'm so sorry. My voice is usually a lot like bigger and booming. And today, whew, I'm just having a hard time. But thanks for putting up with me.
No problem. I might get a little hoarse myself, so we can we can
Commiserate.
crow at each other.
There you go. We'll just commiserate over here. Karen, I listen to your podcast. I absolutely love it. I love what you're trying to do, and what you're doing right now, actually. So I apologize. You're not trying to do it. You're out there doing it. You are trying to bust myths and break taboos and bring the heat after 50, which is some things I saw in some writing about you somewhere because you're so famous. Do me a favor and do our audience a favor and just give everybody a little idea of who is Karen, Bigman. What got you into this kind of thing in the first place?
Okay, I just have to tell the paparazzi to keep it down outside.
If you could, I appreciate that because I can't be having them, with the background noise.
Uh, my journey has sort of two chapters that ultimately came together over a period of 10 years. I'm going to start at the end and go back to the beginning. As I was turning 60, I originally spent most of my life raising my family in New York City. After a breakup, I decided to come out to Southern California and enjoy the beach for a while and see what that was like. And I was pushing 60. I had a couple of different jobs or careers. I had done life coaching, divorce coaching. I'd done some technology, which was back at my roots where I started from. And none of them really ended up being something that got me very excited all the time. And when I came out here, a couple things happened. One, I realized that it was actually there was a pivotal moment in a book club where we were reading a book that had a sex scene in it, and the wife was going down on the husband. I'm going to get a little graphic, folks. And the person who had recommended the book was absolutely mortified and embarrassed that she had recommended a book where there was a sex scene, and this also was between a husband and wife. And everyone around the room was probably in the middle-aged group, and I was so surprised that there was so much shame around this. At the same time, the conversation around menopause started getting louder, and I was just like, why isn't anyone talking about any of this stuff? Why is this so embarrassing? Why is this so shameful? I've been talking about it for forever. But I'm also a New Yorker. I've lived in New York City for the bulk of my life, and this is sort of a conservative area in Southern California. But I said, WTF, I am going to just start a podcast. And I literally started talking into my phone and just started recording. What realized as the time went on was that my story actually began when I left my marriage in my early 50s, and I started getting much more sexual. Towards the end of my marriage, we weren't really having much sex, and so of course the first thing I did was start to date and enjoy it, and I started having issues related to menopause. Particularly, I was having issues with orgasm, and so I ended up at a sexual medicine practice. And in that practice, it was a wonderful practice in that they not only looked at the medical side of things, but they also had a sex therapist in the room with you. And she started asking those really uncomfortable questions. Did you ever orgasm before? How many partners have been, helped you orgasm? Like all the things related to sex, but that were making me blush, but eventually just became questions they'd ask me every time I came in to visit. And the other thing that they did, that the sex therapist did, is she asked if I'd ever used a vibrator. So I was about 52 around that time. I had kind of heard of vibrators, but that just felt like one of these super taboo, embarrassing things. And I said, well, not really. And she broke out this like little blue bullet vibrator and told me to go in the room next door and try it. So that really truly was my sexual awakening.
Okay.
And every time I'd go back, was every few months I'd go back for a checkup. They had also, my testosterone level was low, which affects libido in midlife in women as well as in men. And I needed all these things because of my changing body. And so when it got to this point, 10 years or so, or 8 years later, I had already had so many of these conversations with my friends. I had brought the sex therapist to a dinner party. We talked about all the different vibrators. We talked about all kinds of issues women have with sex. And it was like, I guess that I can talk about this, but it's not true that everybody else can. And so there in Taboo to Truth was born. And along the way, I discovered the Sexual Health Alliance and became a certified sex educator. And nothing has lit me up as much as doing this work and learning and meeting this community, which is just so open and welcoming and sex positive. And it's just been a great joy.
I mean, wow, boom, mic drop. That's a fantastic story right there. I mean, you
A
could
little
wrap.
long-winded, but
Not at all. Not at all. It was very, very informative. None of this happened until basically after your divorce, then.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So if you don't mind me asking, and you always have the right to say, hey, pass on a question. Okay.
Okay.
But
Yep.
because I know I do a lot of work with men and,
Hmm.
men's groups and things, and this sort of stuff comes up a ton, but it comes up in the safety of a men's group, where nobody really, is going to, what happens there stays there type of thing, right? Um, was this not something that you and your husband at the time ever discussed? Like you ever talked about, and was that kind of what led you into this and like wanting to get people to talk about it? Because I listen to your podcast. One of the things I hear a lot is communicate, communicate, communicate. I mean, it seems to be your mantra almost.
Well, the foundation of most divorces is a lack of communication.
Well,
So you could say that we
fair.
definitely were not good communicators, or at least
Right.
that what we were communicating to one another was vastly different. So no, we did not. And part of I think I got married in my mind fairly young. I met my ex-husband when I was 25 and we got engaged in 6 months. I hadn't had a ton of experience. And one of the things I hadn't realized back then was that there was this thing inside of me that wanted to get out and start talking and really be real and raw and me. And I was always shamed into keeping it inside, which happens to
Mhm.
many of us. I grew up in an Eastern European home. My parents were Eastern European, and everything was, hush hush and quiet. And it's like you do the things you're supposed to do and follow our rules and live our life, and that's it. And so I I always liked sex, but you're not supposed to like sex as a girl. You're not supposed to talk about it. And so my ex and I, we had a decent sex life up until the point that the communication got terrible. But it wasn't like we really sat and talked about it and said, let's try this, let's try that. How does it feel? And all those things. So even that conversation that today for me is mostly simple was not so easy, certainly not in my marriage, but even as I started to get onto the dating world, it takes time to feel comfortable for most of us to have those conversations.
Interesting. Okay. So your sort of metamorphosis into who you are now. It began then. You mentioned a couple of these events, where this took place, and I know you're just sort of cherry picking these couple of events, but it seems like a very big change from where you were when you were getting divorced to where you are now. To I'm not talking about it, to not only am I talking about it, but I'm one of the leaders in the field talking about it. So that's a pretty big change. How can people start to make that change? And are there, how can they avoid some of the things that may have gotten in your way?
Everyone should go to therapy or coaching or some kind of coaching. I mean, I'm a strong believer. Even if you think everything is working in your life, we've all got things that we don't talk about or we think are not that important, but become very important as we move on. And for me, I actually sadly had a bad depression in my 40s. And I think it was the beginning of me realizing I was living a life that I didn't really want to be living. I wanted to do things differently, but I didn't really understand it. And I had to deal with all my childhood trauma and all the things that many of us
Mm.
have experienced that took time. So I think it's a progression. I think there's no shame in talking about it. There's no shame in going to finding a therapist. And um, I in order to really embrace my passion for me, I had to deal with all these other things. And even to this day, I continue to work on myself and things continue to change and evolve in how I approach things. And so when you are aware, very self-aware, I think that's how you finally figure out what is truly what you're meant to be or do or where you're supposed to be. And it's an evolution. And I think a lot of people say they're following their passion because that's the script that they were told to do, whether their parents encouraged them to go in a certain profession or they thought, women are supposed to do this, men are supposed to do that. I think that is it's kind of like I always used to say when I was a divorce coach, I still say this because I coach people on dating too, is it's like finding the one. There's no one, in my opinion. There's many. There might be one for this, one for this, one for this. And I think it's the same thing with finding the passion. I think I needed to try all these different things to finally find the one thing that lights me up right now. And in 5 years, something else might light me up.
Nice. Okay, you're talking about some much deeper work
Oh, yeah.
on you then
Yeah.
that has taken place in that time frame, of course.
Yes.
How often, because you help people on this, you're a certified coach on this sort of thing. How often do you find that it isn't even about the sex? It's about what's going on inside the people.
Often it's a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of shame, whether it's religious shame, whether it's shame of not knowing, whether it's shame of body changes. There's so many things that are emotional that will manifest in the bedroom in one way or another, whether um, for a woman, it may just be like your brain can never get in it, or you can't get aroused, or you have some physical issue. For a man, it may be performance issues that become emotional issues, and then fear of intimacy because of them. I mean, everything comes back to yes, there is dysfunction, things that don't work anymore proper or don't work the same way anymore. But I think the bulk of it is some sort of emotional upheaval or challenge or just embracing, like for me, one of the things, just embracing my sexuality and the fact that I like it, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to have sex consensually and safely with multiple people.
Sure. So there's a lot of permission that you have to give yourself before you can kind of get into this too.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that's it. Yes.
Well, I mean,
Flat.
definitely you have to give yourself permission, but I think part of the work is figuring out how to give yourself permission. It's even permission to hire a therapist. Like I remember the first time I called my therapist. I had been in a mother's group that was run by a therapist. My kids were really little, and things weren't going well. My family, I was having a lot of issues with my. I didn't really understand that there was an uncomfortableness in my marriage, but it was there. And I finally, there was this pivotal fight that I had with my sister, and I just literally, I said to my husband, we need to leave New York because I can't be in this environment anymore. And it wasn't that I needed to leave New York, is that I needed to deal with it. And I finally got the courage, this was 22, 23 years ago, to call the person who ran the group and start seeing her privately. And it was like this rush of stuff started to come out. So like just starting that process was giving, I had to give myself permission to say it's okay to need a therapist and to hire her. And then also finding a good one. I happened to be lucky enough to have known her before, so it was a good fit, and just starting to figure out what are the things I really needed to talk about that I didn't even know that I needed to talk about. So I don't think permission's just that one thing, but it is certainly important, and more so I would say for women, because women are not taught about pleasure, that they're entitled to pleasure. What men are, just because we need men to ejaculate to make babies. And so that's like they're always going to be, sort of conditioned to have that, where we're not ever taught that we're supposed to enjoy sex except for the experience of having a baby
Hmm.
or making a
Interesting.
baby.
Now, I know that you told me beforehand that you work with men and women on
Mhm.
this. Um, do you find that sex therapy as a profession is misunderstood in terms of like what it entails and what goes on? And what can you tell us about, what happens in sex therapy?
So I'm not a licensed therapist. So let's just be
Okay.
clear. That's I would refer someone to a therapist. I think
Okay.
the misconception is that sex coaching or sex or sex therapy involves touch. I think that's the first misconception. There are touch professionals that help people, whether, some people have suffered sexual trauma as a child or younger and they have issues with sex. Some people have some severe emotional issues that make it very difficult for them to be intimate. So, any kind of touch therapist, there are surrogates, cuddle therapists, there are all different kinds. Typically work in a triad with a sex therapist. So you'll have a licensed sex therapist who's overseeing the client, and then they may suggest a surrogate person. Now, they're not necessarily all in the room together, but they're working together. So I don't do any of that. I am a coach. So I will kind of help you figure out what the issues are. I may help you, give you some thoughts and ideas and advice. I do a lot of dating coaching. That's kind of my thing lately with women. It's a lot about getting through, the whole idea that we're no longer sexual during or after menopause. But if it starts to get really where I see that somebody's having emotional challenges that are above my pay grade, I will often refer them to a sex therapist. What is a sex therapist? To your question, a sex therapist is a licensed therapist, so maybe they may be a social worker, a psychologist, or PhD, excuse me, and they specialize in sex therapy. So a good sex therapist will also have done some training, whether it's in school like mine or the Sexual Health Alliance, that helps them understand what are the challenges are, helps you let go of your own judgments about what you think sex should be, helps you get comfortable with hearing people tell you their very intimate stories without judging them. So good sex therapist goes beyond just being a licensed therapist. They really learn to focus on and have the conversations around sex,
Interesting.
however you define it.
Okay. And so your business, your place in this niche, as it were, is a certified sex educator and sex and dating coach.
Mhm.
So you're talking to people trying to kind of figure out what's wrong with a particular situation.
Or what's right, and how do we embrace that?
Oh,
How
okay.
do we have the confidence to move forward? How do we have the confidence to have the conversations with our partner? How do we even start the conversation? I'm in a long marriage. We haven't had sex, but we still love each other and we want to get back into it. What can we do? How do I even start that? So
Oh,
it's more about sort of it's communication, I think, at the end of the day. And then I might suggest certain, tips and tools and techniques and people that I've met along the way.
nice. Okay, great. I appreciate you. I like to learn on my podcast too. So I had those questions, and I imagine some other person out there has those questions too. So I appreciate you kind of humoring me as I, work my way through what it is
No,
you
you're
do.
not absolutely, and that's I love to teach. So I'm glad that you love to learn because
Good
I
deal.
think you can never learn enough. I mean, I'm happiest when I'm learning and I'm curious, and that's part of why I love this world so much is because I've met people and learned things that I didn't know I didn't know.
Nice. Nice. I appreciate that. So the podcast then is, again, taboo to truth, life and sex after 50. I know that you have a mixture of solo episodes on there where you give some advice on certain topics, and then you also have people that you bring on to interview.
Yes.
So the the purpose of the podcast is,
To inform, to answer the questions that you have but you don't ask, um, to bring to light things that you didn't know existed that might be worth entertaining, to explain that there's something wrong with you if something isn't working right or feeling right, or you're not feeling it, that it's perfectly normal. And here's the medical explanation, or here's the emotional explanation for it. And then sometimes I'll do like this week's episode is a product called Fallofill, which is a filler for men's penis to increase the girth. So I'm a little all over the map, but all within the realm of sex and aging, and that your sex life doesn't end just because you're in midlife or older.
nice. So then, how do you decide who comes on as a guest? What are you looking for in a guest to come on your podcast and contribute to your people that are listening, your listeners?
Somebody who has a story that is going to inspire my audience, somebody that is working in an area. I mean, I've had dominatrixes, people that run sex parties, people that are in this sort of sex positive world. I don't do a lot of product because I'm very particular about, I mean, obviously, I have not personally tried Fallowfield because I don't own a penis, but I believe in the product. So I'm very careful that way. Um, and then just certain like people I meet along the way that have information that I think will be important to my guests that are relevant. So it definitely has to be relevant. And then most importantly, that they're going to help spread the word because this is a conversation that needs to be had by more and more people. And I think, it's like two steps forward and one and a half steps back. I was explaining to you earlier that there's a lot of censorship that goes on with sex education, sadly, even in the areas of menopause and less so in men's sexual health. But it's really important to me that whoever comes on, that we're helping to spread each other's messages.
It's that surprised me when you said it before, because again, I just didn't think that was the type of thing that would be censored, based on things that I've seen get censored. You know, so the as you have had to fight that battle,
Mhm.
how have you found? What have you found is the best way for you to kind of promote the podcast and get it out there, especially given the unique, topic that you deal with and the people you bring on. What's your best way of promoting and getting the word out?
Well, one is guesting on other people's podcasts, which
Sure,
is obviously
right
a
on.
great form of PR and much appreciated. Speaking, trying to get out to conferences, not necessarily into the sex community, but perhaps it's a reinvention or telling my story. And then just the more I'm out in the world, just as soon as I tell people what I do, first, if they just change the subject, then clearly that is, and this happens often in my dating life because I'm single. But most of the time people are super curious and they're like, oh wow, and their mouth kind of drops, and then they start either asking me questions or they tell me, my wife and I don't have sex anymore, or I'm newly single and I don't really know what to do, or whatever it is, the conversations start to drip from there, and it's like one conversation at a time usually.
It's funny because I know a lot of people who, if they meet a doctor, when they're out, they're going to be like, "Oh, hey, you know what? I have this pain in my shoulder. Can you just,
Hmm.
take a look?"
Hmm.
I can only imagine the types of conversations that you have to, deal with. At what point do you go, "Hey, I'm a professional, book an appointment"?
Right now, this is still, I'm literally about at my 2-year anniversary of starting the podcast and starting the work. And so I love to talk about it. I can talk about sex all day long. I have no problem to the point that I forget that most people are uncomfortable. So sometimes I have to, like I have, if you may notice, my earrings right now are vibrators. And I can always tell if somebody knows it's a vibrator or they think it's a microphone, whether they're familiar with vibrators or not. So it's fun. It's like we're laughing, we're having a good time. I used to be a divorce coach. I was a divorce coach for 5 years, and it was felt really rewarding to help people who are going through the process. But man, it was so depressing. Nobody wants to get divorced. Everybody's got a sad story. The kids are in the middle, they're fighting. It's like, who wants to be there? Sex? People want to talk about it. They don't want anyone to hear them, but they want to talk about it.
Gotcha. I, I I feel like I'm being called out here, so I'm just going to have to go ahead and admit I thought they were microphones because you're a podcaster, but I'm also partially blind. I mean, I'm wearing glasses. I
It
don't
was those
know.
or I have the handcuffs. I wasn't sure if to wear the handcuffs for you. So
Oh, I love it. Okay. All right. So anyway, back to the podcast.
yes.
You said you're nearing your 2-year anniversary.
Yep.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
fantastic that you've been
Thank
doing it
you.
that long. About how many episodes do you have?
So I am actually I'm looking at it right now. We're at 113 today. I've started putting out two a week in September. So I was at 100. I think I celebrated my 100th anniversary in sometime in June, I believe. And I have no intention of stopping right now. There's no lack of material, that's for darn sure.
Nice. And you just upped it to twice a week.
Yep. So I do one guest, typically one guest, one solo,
Mhm.
or if it's a long guest episode, I'll put it out in two parts.
Nice. Nice. I have a recommendation for you. Remind me to talk to you after the podcast. I want to
Absolutely.
just
Thank
about
you.
that. But
Mhm.
yeah. congrats on that because doing that second one a week will also help you, get the word out a little bit more all on its own.
Yep. Yep.
But hitting that milestone, that 100 episode milestone is a big one for people. Um, out of the millions and millions of podcasts that are out there, I think it's only 4% of those hit, the that 100 episode mark and become established podcasts, so to speak. So that's big. Congratulations. Very cool.
Thank you. Thank you. And I had another milestone. It was either today or yesterday, which is that YouTube has approved me for advertising. So you have to be at a certain number of listen
Ah,
hours
yeah.
and subscribers. So that was pretty exciting as well. So yeah, I'm on my way.
Right on.
Monetization, please.
All right, we're naturally segueing into we're not ending the interview, but tell
Okay.
everybody how to find you. What are you called on YouTube? Is it the same name?
Yeah, so Taboo to Truth podcast on YouTube, and then Instagram Taboo to Truth, TikTok, and LinkedIn. It's Karen Bigman,
Hmm.
and then on my website taboo2truth.com, and I'll allude to the products later. But yeah.
Nice, nice, of course. All right, beautiful. All right, so back to the podcast. I mean, it is Podcaster Nation. I have to come back to the podcast
Oh,
just a little bit.
absolutely.
Yeah. So back to the podcast. As y- with what you're talking about, um, I would imagine it would be a little difficult to implement AI into some of this. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Do you use AI in terms of preparing your podcast, your show notes, that sort of thing, or does the subject matter make that a little bit difficult since AI only knows what we tell it?
Um, Everything. So when I first started trying to do some content on chat, it was censoring me.
Ah,
Really interestingly. Now it has so much of my content because I do a lot of content that it helps me guide, that it knows my voice. And so what I will use it for is less to give me my scripts, but more sometimes to help me just elaborate on a point or just do my headlines, taglines, things like that. I do have a producer that handles all the back end of that and posts and all that for me. So most of that is her, but the content itself is all me guiding chat or me just my stuff because sometimes it's just so easy to talk about it.
I wondered about that because you mentioned the censorship, and I know a lot of folks have experienced different types of censorship through the chat programs, and so I was kind of assuming that maybe you got hit with a few things dealing with that. So,
Yeah, lately I haven't had any issues with chat. I mean, my podcast is explicit, and on YouTube I will try to put out my episodes without the over 18, just so they'll show up in the suggested. But I keep getting notes like we took it down because it's not over 18 or we made it over 18. So it's getting harder too. At some point, we are going to have to start censoring our websites. I mean, putting the like 18 and over and checking IDs if you
mhm.
have more than a certain amount of content that's, not appropriate, which I do not. But yeah, so it's getting harder, but it's mostly the social media platforms that censor me, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.
Gotcha.
Occasionally LinkedIn.
Really? I didn't
Hmm.
realize LinkedIn censored anything.
Oh yeah, they take content down completely. I have a few peers who have had their content taken down from platforms, totally, completely taken down, or they've
Wow.
been banished from LinkedIn and have to fight their way back. And these are not people who are I mean, there are people out there that are putting out some really racy stuff that are not getting censored, and then there are people that are really doing good work. One of them has this ethical porn site, and like the word porn just throws everybody into a complete tizzy, even if it's done with the right intention. So, yeah, your kids are looking at it no matter what. So why not find out about it in a way that's healthy and educational?
Yeah, I listened to part of an episode that you had on your podcast also talking about that. So you've got kind of a different idea on porn than sort of the mainstream would have it. You want to throw that out there?
Curious what you think the opinion of mainstream is.
Let's just say the right now there's just an overwhelmingly like negative look at porn
Mhm.
among men's groups especially, and there's this whole movement to like not do it. You know what I mean? Sort of it's an anti-pleasuring yourself campaign that just has really taken a lot of root. And
Yeah.
so, that's why I was like, I wonder what someone in your business thinks of this. And then, you had a pretty open thought on it. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
know if you wanted to share that or not.
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, I don't think it's healthy for men to hold back from what is naturally what they want to do. I think there's a point where it becomes obsessive and problematic and interferes with your life, and that is a time when you need to look into it. But porn, like, porn is entertainment, like any other kind of entertainment. It just happens to be people doing something that we normally don't do in public. So I see nothing wrong with watching porn. In fact, I think it's a wonderful tool to use with your partner. The problem with porn, especially sites like Pornhub, is that they curate content that is not necessarily legally theirs. They don't necessarily vet the actors to make sure that they are not only consenting, but of age. And I mean, I have one porn actor that I know that would get to a set and find out that the things she had agreed to in her contract were just the beginning of what they were asking her to do. So there's a lot of things that go on in porn that are not healthy, and we can't see that in the front of the screen. But in terms of using porn to and to masturbate if you don't have sex with your partner, or just to masturbate because it feels good once in a while and it releases some great hormones or helps you sleep, I see nothing wrong with that.
Interesting. Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. And don't get me wrong, that wasn't my passing judgment on it when I said that. So that was
No,
just
I'm
I'm just asking questions from the
no, absolutely. I hope I didn't sound too defensive. It's frustrating because I think that we have everybody has as a judgment about porn,
Mhm.
but you go home and close the door and put on DuckDuckGo or some incognito window, and everybody's probably got a few tabs open at Pornhub or Bella Bliss or whatever it's called. So it's unfortunate that there's one. I guess they're trying to pass a law to outlaw it in certain places, and I think it was Pornhub that said, "Well, we're just going to expose all the politicians that are on our site." Right?
There you go. Regardless of what they decide, I'm definitely behind them on that reaction, just because I
Yeah.
really don't care for politicians very much. But
And you want to teach your kids, like if you certainly don't want to teach your kids with Pornhub, but most kids by the age, I think it's by the age of 8, have stumbled upon or seen some kind of online porn.
yeah,
So if you sort of, pardon the expression, nip it in the bud and explain to them, like, this is not real, this is not what real sex is, or this is, something for grown-ups or whatever it is, at least you haven't made it so taboo that they're going to do it behind your back and potentially become somewhat deviant because they're so, they're just trying to hide everything and you don't even know what's going on.
right, right. I can appreciate that. In the interest of time, because I know you have a
Yep.
hard stop, I want to be able to get you out of here. I really try to get in my corny question to everybody, so I
Okay.
want to hit you with it real quick. Are you ready? You strapped in?
I'm
You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay. When it comes to doing your podcast, what is it about doing your podcast that you love the most? And what is it about doing your podcast that you just absolutely throw it out the window, can't stand, hate the most?
I love guest interviews. I love to learn. I'm a super curious person, and I love that this has given me a foot in the door to meet some really amazing educators, entertainers, people from all walks of the sex positive world. So that part is the part I love. Um, I'd say there's two things that I could come to mind when you say what I really hate. One is doing all the social media stuff, which I've pretty much outsourced. The other is I don't mind creating short form content, but when I create my solo episodes, for some reason I have to record them about 10 times each time I do them because I'm constantly messing up. Like I can't just when I'm off the cuff, I do a much better job than when I actually have something, certain facts and points that I'm trying to make, and I just record and re-record it, and then I forget the microphone and it's turned off and something weird in the background, or I got a frog in my throat. So I'm sure I'm not the only person. You start to understand how the movies work when they why they take so long to film.
Nice. Great, great
Yeah.
answer. Love the answer. All right. Yeah. Short form. A lot of people just don't like doing solo episodes. They don't like watching themselves or they don't like talking into the camera. Did you have trouble getting into doing the solo episode part of it, or did interviews come naturally for you? How did it all play?
So I wasn't video in the very beginning. I just started doing audio, and then once it's like anything. Once you start, it becomes easier and easier. Like I look back on it now, and I can't believe I was nervous. I actually even they filmed me a couple months ago for an upcoming documentary next year on menopause called Hot! Exclamation point, and the director was like, "Oh, you're so great at." at being on camera. And I was kind of like, well, really? I mean, I'm even now, like I'm totally comfortable where before I wasn't. So I think like we if I don't know if you're going to ask me this or not, but like if I could give one piece of advice to anybody who's thinking about podcasting is just do it. Because the more you do it, the easier it gets. And nobody knows whether like most people, even with the content that I think everybody knows it, who, is this going to be something new? People don't know what you know. You don't realize what you know. And it's important to share what you know, but it's also it's not that hard once you get like anything. It's like riding a bicycle. When you first start, you're very wobbly, but eventually, like, do you even remember how it was when you first learned to ride a bicycle?
No, I don't actually, thank goodness. So, yeah, no, that's great advice. It really is. And I do. I usually end with that question, but that's okay. You're a podcast
Sorry,
host.
it came
This
to
happens
mind
to me
now. I'm
all the
messing up
time on
here.
this show, all the time on this show, because I'm
You need to
talking
be
to
able to
podcast
pivot. Yep.
hosts.
Yep.
And, and as hosts, we cannot stand sitting back and not being in control of the narrative. I totally get it. So, no, you're totally fine. Well, then let's do this. Let's end on a different question, okay? And I don't know, let's move off the podcast and get back to subject matter, because we covered the podcast pretty well. Love what you're doing. Very interesting episodes, by the way.
Thank you.
Um, as you, with what you do, and in talking to people out there who are hearing this episode, and maybe it's hitting home with them, and they're going, "Man, I feel this way, or I have trouble with that," because whenever a topic like this comes up, I think we immediately go inside, connect somewhere in our minds, and go, "All right, what issue am I having?" Because I don't know if you can help it, when you have this sort of a conversation. So for the folks who are at home and they may be connecting with something that you're saying, what is a good parting thought for them if they're maybe feeling like they're suffering from shame or not sure how to begin helping themselves? Maybe we end with that. What's a good parting thought for those folks on our way out the door?
Well, first, I'd say you're not alone because if you're thinking it, chances are somebody else is thinking it as well. So that would be number one. And number two is like there's a lot of information out there that will make you feel better. There are a lot of people like me, other people that, resources for you to get educated about whatever it is the issue that you're facing, whether you reach out to me directly or you go search on different materials or questions that you have. It's all out there, and it kills me that there's so much shame. We can talk about love, we can talk about money, but we can't talk about sex. Like we're all having it, hopefully. Or we did at some point.
I was almost waiting for the caveat. I'm like, wait a minute. I know a
Some
lot of
people will
people.
say, wait a minute, it's been 10 years. Okay, you should call me.
I was just going to say that. So those people definitely should contact you. Right. All right. Beautiful. That's fantastic. All right, Karen, one more time, contact info for everybody.
Yeah, so I actually neglected to mention before, I just launched my Substack. So you can look up Karen Bigman on Substack. I'm starting to do a newsletter website. I actually have if you know where to start and don't want to talk to anybody and you're embarrassed, but you have $97, I have a sex ed masterclass called Hotter, Wiser, Wilder. And that has pardon the expression, shit ton of information, everything from talking about your sexual beliefs to your anatomy, menopause, andropause, tips, techniques, communication, and then there's a module on dating for those that are single. So that would be a great place to start with just getting some information. And then I'm on all the social media platforms. So feel free. And if you just have a question, my Substack right now, it's free, but if you go behind the paywall for $5, you can ask me anything.
Nice. Okay, interesting. The course you were just talking about,
Yes.
is that through your website that people
Yeah, it's on my
sign up?
website. Yeah, there's a tab on my website for the masterclass. And if you have any questions, of course, let me know. I'm
Okay.
happy also if you want to offer a discount for your listeners too. So I can give you that coupon to put in the show notes.
Wonderful. All right, folks, check the show notes because we'll have the website. We'll have, whatever coupon she's talking about right now. We'll put that down there. That's great. And I appreciate that, Karen. I'm sure that the listeners do too. Folks, so check the show notes for everything. And Karen, thank you for coming on here, having such an open and honest conversation about all this, for educating me on a few things, and just for being yourself. You're amazing. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to to showcase my stuff.
Not at all. Karen Bigman, host of the Taboo to Truth Life and Sex After 50 podcast. Folks, this has been another awesome episode of the Podcaster Nation, where we're always trying to bring you new and exciting stuff, and I think we did today. The reason we have such fantastic podcasters on here is because this is the podcast that's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And I think we showed yet again today that this is truly the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing.